And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau. And we got wine updates.
Oh, it's settling nicely.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's going through malolactic fermentation slowly, and
Yeah.
hopefully in a couple weeks it'll get done, so we can put the sulfur dioxide in it and kill everything.
We talked about pressing it last time, right? I'm trying to remember. I think.
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, we pressed it all off, and now we got it. Yeah, I think we talked about it. We got it in these big tanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still going through the secondary fermentation, which is a lot slower, and this is a more a touch and go dangerous part because the wine is more. It's able to. It can go bad basically.
Yeah. You can get microbial spoilage, and oxidation and all this kind of stuff. Right now, we're still waiting on the barrel delivery. When the barrels get here, we'll be able to put it into the barrels, top them all the way up, and then there won't be any risk of getting more dissolved oxygen into it. Right now, they're in big plastic tanks, and there's airspace in the top of those tanks that they're huge, so it's not that big of a deal, but you don't want them in there for a long time. It's okay to settle in there. We got variable capacity tanks, but they're just big, round steel tanks. Yeah. And so the lid, there's just airspace on top. Whereas in a barrel, when the barrel's laying on its side, you fill it all the way up, and it comes all the way up to the bung. The bung hole, which is 2 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
That's the only surface
area,
that's exposed to oxygen, and you put the bung in it, and that airspace is tiny compared to the volume of the wine. So you're both protected with the barrel against oxidation, and then of course once the lactic acid bacteria is done converting the malic to lactic acid, then we can put the SO2 in it, and then we can go on vacation.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're waiting for. So this week we had a really long and excellent conversation with the guys from Conspirinormal about all kinds of topics, and also the online Strange Realities conference that they've got coming up. And it was a really good conversation, so we'll get into that. But first, space weather news. That's right, space weather news. From spaceweather.com.
The brand new space weather news music got the boot. Back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board, back to the old.
Didn't cut the mustard.
So I think this is a piece of a larger story, so people might want to check it out. But it says the Carrington event was not unique. It might be time to rewrite the history books. New research shows that the Carrington event, a monster solar storm that hit Earth 161 years ago this week, might not be as unique as previously thought. Historical documents from East Asia suggest that Carrington events, plural, have happened many times before and probably will again. And then they have a link to the full story. So go check that out at spaceweather.com. And they also say that for the 5th straight day Arctic auroras, Arctic skies aren't blue anymore. They are blue-green. With the fading of the summer sun, the auroras are showing themselves in the midnight sky. They have some good photographs here. And people are saying it is a pleasure to greet the auroras again. Finally, the sky is dark enough and the clouds disappeared to reveal the beautiful lights. And this has been going on for 5 straight days. Earth's magnetic field has been rumbling since August 28th. Says Green, who operates a sensitive magnetometer in his backyard to monitor geomagnetic activity. Man, cool. One of those.
Yeah.
Says this is a result of Earth entering and progressing through a fast-flowing solar wind stream. It is always so fascinating to see the effects of solar weather directly for myself down here at ground level from my home in the UK.
That's cool.
Yeah, Earth is still inside the stream, which is flowing from a northern hole in the sun's atmosphere. And Arctic skywatchers should be alert for more blue-green on September 2nd. So, current conditions. Solar wind speed is 463.5 kilometers per second, and the density is 4.9 protons per cubic centimeter.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
Yeah. No sunspots right now. Sunspot number is 0.
Ah.
Yeah, for 12 days. So we've had a stretch of 12 spotless days. And we're down to 68% of 2020 total spotless days. And let's see, the neutron count today is 9% plus, so rated as high over the maximum 11.7%.
It seems pretty stable, that measurement.
Yeah. Yeah. And the graph here is showing, it's kind of stable.
Hanging out up there.
Yeah. 2019 looks relatively stable. 2015, it was all the way down to close to -5%. And in 2010, it was all the way up at the max. That was the max point, 11.7.
Okay.
So there we go. That's your Space Weather News update, people.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation we have with the guys from Conspirinormal.
Yeah, and Russ told me to hit the record button right when we got on the call. And, we talked about a whole bunch of stuff that is not on the show. So we just kind of jumping in the middle of the conversation when we get down to the Snake Bros topics.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's what you get.
That's right. We had to delete all of their crap out of the first part of the show. It was just total crap, guys.
Censorship. Full censorship here on Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Hope you enjoy the conversation.
Think about archaeological hoaxes.
Usually when I find out they were a hoax, I'm like, all right, moving on, I'm not interested in them. Usually they're disappointing. So, but yeah, I do come across them. And also, it's hard to tell, because I think that there are a lot of things called hoaxes that may not have been hoaxes. So it's very difficult for me to tell which ones are and which ones aren't. Now, obviously, there's some that are clear hoaxes, but there's this battle. Like, anytime you have something that seems to be totally out of place, it's called a hoax. And then, so there's and I'm more of a collector of, the out of place artifacts. Like, those are the things that I'm really interested in, the real ones. And so many, pretty much all of them are called hoaxes in one way or another. Somebody's called every single one of them a hoax, right? And so what I usually see is the tendency for people to take things that don't make sense in the standard model and call them a hoax. And so if, when it comes to actual hoaxes, if it turns out that that's what it is, I'm just like, all right, I'll move on from this because it isn't interesting to me because it isn't a real archaeological artifact.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of the opposite because I want to know, well, what's the story with it? And like, why would someone create this hoax?
Yeah. Sometimes that's interesting for sure. Yeah.
And like, Adam has witnessed, he might want to relay this story. Like he's witnessed like actual trade of these type of objects that are pretty obvious hoaxes before.
Yeah, this was interesting, guys. I'll tell the story. I think I've told it on Where Did the Road Go one time. Just to names. There will be no names to protect the guilty.
Right.
So, I was at a conference about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, and there was a gentleman there that came up from Mexico. He was American, at least he seemed to be, and he had his son with him. And he came up from Mexico, and he was at this conference, and he had all these different figurines, look like he called them artifacts, things that were just spread out all over this table. And so my old co-host Luke was with us at this conference, and he went up and he looked at the table, and he goes back to me and he says, Adam, he says, "It's weird, man, because like this guy's telling me that he gets all this stuff from just right outside his house, where he like, you know, he lives in some kind of area that's got all these artifacts, and he picks them up just daily. And but what the weird thing was is that what Luke said was that I saw a character that I saw in like a meme from last year. Okay, now keep in mind he's got like his like teenage son with him this entire time, right?
Yeah.
So he may not know what that character is, but his son might have been tasked to carve one of these things and did, and made it into this character, which obviously is a character from the 20 teens and not from like, you know, 9th century Mexico. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. So a couple of days go by and we're still at the conference, and there was a rather well-known person. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if you've had this person on your show, but we have had this person on our show. And, you know, you've only got about 300 and something shows to go look and to scour to figure this out if you really want. So he was there speaking at this conference, and he goes over and he goes and talks to this guy, and he's looking at all these quote unquote artifacts, talking to the dude, and then all of a sudden the guy just like, they do some kind of business with each other. The guy leaves and starts packing up to drive back to Mexico. Okay.
Wow.
And this is pretty much the other side of this is pretty much closer to the Canadian border than it is to the Mexican border. So that tells you how far this guy traveled to get to where he was. So I go and talk to the conference organizers, and I said, you know, that was really weird. Like, what's up with that guy? Why? And I told them actually what Luke said, and they were like, oh, well, he's here every year that we've done this conference. He comes, he waits for this person to look at his artifacts, and the guy buys them, and then he goes back on his way to Mexico.
Wait, he buys all of them?
He buys, I'm not sure if it's all of them, but it was at least a good amount of them. Yeah. I think the figure that I was told was like $10,000.
Wow.
And so this person buys these things from him, and I really don't know what the motive is for buying them, whether he actually believes that these are actual artifacts, or whether he's in some way trying to just buy them to take them off the market.
Yeah.
The motivation is unclear, but I thought it was very strange. And actually I forgot about it until Serfiel and I were talking one day about, he was telling me about all the kind of studies that he was doing on people back in the, 18th and 19th century, faking artifacts.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I was like, wait a minute, I saw this go down just like a few years ago. And so it was just interesting.
That actually,
when we're done recording, I can actually tell you who it was if you want.
That actually sounds, well,
like a drug deal.
It's possible that it could be.
Well,
like Indiana Jones is just going to bust through any minute.
Maybe there's some cocaine in those.
Well, figurines. Yeah. So, well, what I was actually thinking is that fake ones are a great cover for a real one. You got a whole car full of fake crap, but there's one real artifact in there. That's what the dude's really buying. And the cover is all this fake crap that isn't illegal because it's fake, right? I don't know. There's plenty of ways.
I can see something like that.
Yeah, like
that's a good point. We actually talked a little bit last night about just a little bit with the guys that are in the conference. We talked with I think David Metcalf brought up the whole Hobby Lobby stuff. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, about them like illegally selling artifacts from Iraq
I heard of that. Never looked into it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, they're like real, they're really big fundamentalists, and they were hoarding and purchasing some of these stolen artifacts, probably from the chaos, in Iraq when the museum was overtaken and all that kind of stuff. But like the thing that really fascinates me though is like what value would something like this have, right? And it also reminds me of like the metamaterials idea in ufology. These weird materials that supposedly have extraterrestrial origin, and just that I think there's always been this like illicit trade in this stuff, because within them, well, first of all, they could just be like investments, because you can always find someone probably to buy it from you.
Yep.
And maybe stories are made, and like the story comes along with the artifact, and you can do things like well, I guess you can't, it's not as easy to like create a religion anymore like some of my ancestors did with some of their forgeries, but like maybe there's some kind of like weird value in them, and that you could flip them, like
Yep.
maybe you pick it up from the guy from Mexico for $2,000, but this other collector sucker who you could sell it to individually for $5,000-$10,000, and maybe they go around like that, or maybe the person with the right story has to find the right artifact to kind of weave their little thing. And it's really fascinating to me. And there's this book called The Enigmatist that I'm trying to track down. And there's another book called the Solving the Beale Ciphers by this guy, Paul G. Stewart. They're both self-published, so they're really hard to find. I don't think Solving the Beale Ciphers is, though. But he talks about the Kenningston rune stones and like connects it to these Masonic groups. And he thinks it's like this elaborate Masonic way of, I guess, like transmitting these different ciphers and telling their own little story to each other. So stuff like that is interesting. I think it's wasn't the Bat Creek stone the one with the Hebrew on it supposedly?
Yeah,
like
I think so.
It's like the same inscription that's in like Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry or something like that. So I think there's definitely some Masonic stuff too, and just like those New Atlantean ideas. And so the hoaxes almost like fascinate me more than a lot of the real stuff.
It's almost kind of like they're trying to like backdate their history onto the ancient world in a certain way. Like, what Serfiel was talking about Haywood before, this idea that it was actually people of European descent, blah, 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 that were here first. It wasn't the Indians or the Native Americans. But it's almost like in a certain way that they're trying to like kind of backdate the presence of the Europeans, but more specifically, masonry.
Yeah.
Too. It's very strange.
Yeah, and it's I just find it. I mean, if you want somebody to have been here before the Native Americans, well, they would be here 10,000 or more years ago. So calling them Europeans is kind of silly in the first place. I think, it's just like, who are we even talking about that long ago?
Yeah.
And it's so
because the Europeans weren't even the Europeans back then.
It's like,
right.
When we're looking at this stuff, to us, what matters is what they were doing, not who necessarily they were, I guess. You know what I mean? We're more interested in and whoever it was, what we're interested in is what did they know? Why did they build these things? What were they for? And how did they do it?
And what was the level of their technology? So when it looks like there may have been communication across vast oceans, that suggests higher technology than what standard model archaeologists and historians give them credit for.
Yeah, whoever they were.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. That's
well, and within those structures it's obvious that they would have to know so many of these geometric and mathematical concepts and astronomical concepts. So if you think about like those first surveyors who are mostly Masons going out across the land, finding these places, measuring them, recognizing all of the mathematics. It's easy to see though where they could be like, and the
People that we
the modern native they were around not understanding that stuff to be like, holy shit, this is some part of what I'm a part of.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, that's sort of happened everywhere. Like, people, societies think that they're really advanced, and then they go and they find these giant triangles made out of stone, and they're like, holy crap, people knew more than we did a long time ago. You know what I mean? But yeah, I see your point that they would associate that knowledge with their own fraternity.
Yeah.
And so they may theorize that, like, okay, did the Masons come here
A long time ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at
And
least
because there's
the
so much
idea-
stuff in the Masonic mythology about the antediluvian world, it's
Yeah.
like, oh wow, this is the lost civilization.
Right. So what's wrong with that? I mean, to me, I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. Like, maybe that knowledge that is the foundation of the Masonic traditions was worldwide long before these modern Masons came and found it here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and those are all the questions. It's a lot bigger. The picture is a lot bigger. There's a lot of ways to think about it. But the past just stains everything.
And there's just, there are assholes everywhere, right? I mean, all it takes is a few people to really, they can really screw stuff up. And like earlier we were talking about the destruction of archaeological sites. And I really don't like that. I read about it sometimes, and especially when it's happening now. But the farther back you go, the less I still don't like it. The farther back in time you go, like, so that's 200 years ago, some site was destroyed, or 400 years ago, some site. I mean, it's only very recently then that this kind of stuff has been preserved, where people kind of, archaeology is a young science.
Yeah.
And really the history of, the known history of the world is destruction of ancient sites or people living on top. I mean, we find it. You find a city, and it's actually stacks and stacks and stacks of cities and habitation sites going back 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And the people that lived there 5,000 BC did not care about the stuff that was left there by the people that lived there 8,000 BC unless they could use it.
Sure.
So it's like that's not always the case, because sometimes there's a continuity there and they would preserve it. But yeah, like the destruction of archaeological sites of significance or artifacts of significance, and burials especially, is saddening. But it's also just, I don't know, it's what happens most of the time.
Tear down
what do you
that
think
temple.
about-
We shall build a better one on top of it. That's like been the story.
What do you think about those kind of ideas of like kind of the more conspiratorial ideas that like these ancient sites are supplanted to like disrupt the energy grid or to take over the power that they had? Like, here we've got a lot of supplanting on top of mounds of churches, plantation houses, monuments. Usually, it's a city center because and that could just be, it's next to the river. It's here, like in particular in Nashville, the first French who settled here settled on top of a mound just so it was just defensively better for their little fort.
And also, if the river floods, you're not in the flood zone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Colin,
What do you think about those ideas, like that it's like kind of this, evil conspiracy to build on top of this stuff?
I think sometimes, and you can see this historically, and even going back into ancient times, you can definitely see that it's a purposeful appropriation or a takeover of a site. They knock down what was they conquer the place, you knock down what was there, and then you build your own. Whether it's always an evil plan, I don't know, but I do think Kyle and I have this thing, and we say this to each other when we're just looking for midden. We're walking around out here on some property looking for where's a good place to hunt for arrowheads. And the thing we say to each other is people always live in the same places.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've just learned over time that often the place where you find the best midden and all the little pieces of arrowheads laying all over the place is the place where the really old farmhouse is.
Yeah.
It may not
the original homestead.
Yeah, the original homestead. Yeah.
Of the people that migrated here is almost always in the same place where ancient peoples lived. So
because they're good place. So was that a purposeful thing, or is it just the right spot? You know, I don't know. And it may be energy based. People, you know, you come onto some land and you're kind of walking around like, where do I want to stay? And, you know, if you want to get not so conspiratorial, but maybe more spiritual, you're like, there's a spot where you're just like, this is the right place.
Has an attraction. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I do think that sometimes it's definitely a purposeful sort of takeover. And you can see that all across history. Knock down their monuments and put up your own.
but it was like the Temple of Jupiter
Yeah.
on top of the Baalbek Foundation.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, the way I've always looked at that is that they probably found those foundations and they were like, man, we need to build something awesome here, because I'm sure their engineers looking at that stuff were like, wow,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
It was a
Like,
way of revering that
Yeah.
ancient site. They
So-
built the temple to their biggest god on this thing that they didn't build that's really far away from the center of their civilization. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
and modern archaeologists are like, yeah, it's all Roman.
Right.
So who's doing the appropriating here?
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder if it seems like I really don't understand enough about what modern archaeology is like to understand. Is there less resistance to things like in maybe Europe or places where you don't have this like racial dynamic that you know causes people to be real, you know, nervous about things because of the past, etc. I wonder if there's like more freedom to speculate with, you know, without being accused of things like that.
Yeah, that's hard to say. I mean, it depends on what the past of that nation is and how long ago it was and who they think those people were
Yeah.
and what happened to them, right?
Well, I think the thing is like it's really what a lot of and I really respect, you know, archaeologists, but I think what a lot of them really don't understand is that looking for the mother civilization and these kind of ideas, like it's more of a spiritual quest, and you're not going to stop people from doing that. And, you know, just kind of the way they look down on a lot of it, even if you're an actual scientist, you think it's quaint, etc., you have to just appreciate the human part of that this is like as old as time, a spiritual quest of mankind trying to figure out where it came from or where it got this knowledge, etc. I think that has to be acknowledged and like respected.
That's a good point. I had never thought of it like that.
But they just dismiss it. You know, they're just like, oh, these people are just idiots. But really, like these are big spiritual questions that aren't going to be answered by an archaeological establishment.
Yeah. Well, that's
because
a good
they're just gonna look at it from the point of view of just like pure science and what they can prove,
or what they can claim.
what they can claim.
I'm pretty, I'm pretty jaded on the whole archaeology. I mean, it's you want to talk about archaeological hoaxes? Look at the history of archaeology itself. Man, there's plenty of hoaxes in actual scientific archaeology itself. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
yeah,
Yeah, well, the case in point would be the Great Pyramid, right? I mean, the inscriptions, you know, that
Yeah.
there's no inscriptions in the whole thing, but all of a sudden there's just one.
yeah.
There's an inscription.
And it's exactly saying exactly what they needed it to say to tell the story that they were already telling. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always been suspect. Just to kind of add to the point about like, you know, whether it's political overseas as opposed to here. I mean, I think you can get into some tricky territory. I mean, there's like,
I think especially with like Europeans in non-European places.
Yeah.
I wonder what it's like in Europe.
yeah, I think like his place like Turkey though, like somewhere place like that, where they like,
Yeah.
you know, there's like they claim everything is basically, you know, now especially since there's such a Islamic revival in Turkey, you know, because before it used to be a secular state, but now they try to say like, well, you know, what was it? Göbekli Tepe was like built by Abraham and all these kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, it's more fundamentalist, biblically
Yeah.
based.
Yeah, you get into some weird territory when I guess that they see like, you know, well, they would see the Europeans getting into like, and they're pretty, I mean, they're close to Europe. you know.
Yeah.
But they would see like they would say that like, oh, they're trying to, you know, appropriate our stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there are actual outliers too that make everybody nervous. You know, Kennewick Man was one of them.
Sure.
Let's see, they've
the one that looked like Captain Picard. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah. Yeah, the reconstruction of his face. Yeah. And then, you know, they've found, well, I mean, some of there have been red-haired people found down in South America that made people nervous. And red-haired people had found in China that made people nervous. And so those things are always interesting, and they're kind of just quiet. You know, there's not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of talk about them. When I guess it's when, you know, and this is the same thing with the out of place artifacts. Basically, you're supposed to be going out and looking for evidence of what history was really like, but a lot of times they already have a picture in their heads of what history was really like, and they're just looking for confirmation of that. So you dig up something that doesn't fit with that narrative, and then it kind of makes everybody upset, you know? Mm-hmm. So I imagine that happens everywhere. And it's almost impossible to tell how often because no one talks about it. But, you know, Forbidden Archaeology by Cremo is an excellent example. Maybe not so much of, you know, racial stuff, but just an example of archaeological finds all over the place that have made people nervous. That disappear into museum.
I've got my copy on the shelf right here.
Yeah, so. The things that disappear into museum basements because no one even wants to look at them because they can't even imagine how they might fit into the model that they already have, so they don't even try. Yeah.
But for something like what you know, what the purpose of like some of these ancient sites in the Americas might be, you know, if it was something kind of more spiritual, and there's no record of the beliefs of these, you know, the detailed beliefs or cosmologies of these civilizations, then, you know, archaeology is not going to discover that.
That's right.
It's going to be people speculating or people practicing their own type of spiritual or magical systems, who are going to, you know, discover that, or at least for themselves feel like they're impacted or have some kind of piece to the puzzle.
Well, I have I don't know if this is a good point, but when it comes to the spiritual aspect of these structures, I would say that most likely none of these structures were ever built by the spiritual leaders. They're built by the construction guys. And those guys are engineers, and they do science, and they learn how to build, and they learn mathematics, and so you can look at, you know, a lot of these cathedrals and stuff that are dedicated to a religious, you know, institution, but the structures themselves are amazing in terms of engineering, and they were not built by priests. So it would be the same. Like I, you know, some of these mounds and these walls and the geometry involved and a lot of these Native American sites here, I think it would be the same thing. Like these guys who built those things were scientists. They studied astronomy. They studied building techniques. They studied geometry and engineering. So they put those principles into the structures. And as a builder, you want those things in your structure because it makes it way cooler. You know, It makes it beautiful in a way, to put that type of stuff in there, to make it meaningful. And, you know, I would say that there could be a spiritual aspect to that, because going into some of these amazing cathedrals, you're just like overwhelmed. So maybe there was some type of connection there, but it's just kind of, I guess the point is that when I look at these types of things, that's not my initial thought. Is it like, okay, this is a house of worship, or this is, you know, a temple. Yeah, that's what they're called, but it's pretty clear that the people who built them were concerned with these scientific endeavors, you know?
Yeah, and for us as builders, You know, we've built a lot of things over our lives, and it's real interesting because for a long time we didn't know any of this stuff. We didn't know about sacred geometry. We didn't know about these crazy, awesome astronomical cycles or the magic, quote unquote, magic of numbers involved with precession. But now that we do, everything we build, we look for ways to put those numbers and those principles into them in some way.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think I got Randall Carlson's contractor card around here somewhere he gave me.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. It's just like that. Now that we know about all these things, we're like, okay, we've got to go build this thing. How can we?
How can we hide some?
How
super
can we
cool
put
stuff?
something
Yeah.
cool? Even if
I
it's
mean,
like a
is that not
doghouse.
that is spiritual though? And I think like in these old systems, including a lot of the Western ones, the Pythagorean school, and you got all these other examples. Mathematics, especially, and definitely astronomy and science were integrated into the spiritual system.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting for me to think about that because we don't live in a culture that does that. So I often wonder. I'm like, I don't even know if I know what that means, except that I personally experience a kind of wonder and like a feeling of awe when I contemplate these large cosmic, geometrical, and astronomical concepts, right?
Yeah.
So there's something enticing about these concepts that I can see how those, or just sitting in contemplation of these things, these understandings. Like Kyle and I will sit out and just stare at space at night, right? And we just look at the stars and we're talking about them and we're pointing things out and we're talking about the geometry of the Earth and its movements and all these very long astronomical cycles. And there's a kind of a sense of wonder that comes over you when you're doing that, and that is a spiritual sensation, I think. So that's
A transcend. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's transcendent. You suddenly feel connected to this enormous, amazing, complex, and beautiful system.
Yeah, and incredibly insignificant at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. You're just like, wow.
I am this little tiny mite of
yeah.
dust that nevertheless understands God-like things. Or
Well,
something.
on the most basic level, I think a lot of these places and sites, what you're seeing is it's tracing the stars onto the earth. And so that's that idea of uniting heaven and earth.
Yep.
And the mounds, in the Egyptian mythology, the primordial mound, things like that, it's reaching towards the sky. These are basically places where the spiritual and the material world are thought to be, to join or be the thinnest. And it's using the symbolism of, the sky and astronomy and the earth to say that on the next like esoteric level. So I think that's just at the most basic point. That's where most of these places are. That's why they're having to deal with the alignments.
Yep.
And tracing the alignments and tracing the stars. It's just about bringing the heavens down on whatever level you want to think about that.
Yeah. So I don't, I'm not trying to demean spirituality whatsoever.
Right, yeah.
With the point, it seems to me like when I look at the academic community, and you kind of get a sense of the way they look, or, seem to look at purely spiritual things when they're over here doing science, and then when they make these discoveries and they're like, yeah, it's just they built this because of their crazy religious beliefs.
Yeah.
That's basically the kind of attitude they have. Oh yeah, guess what? They believed in this crazy crap that's obviously total BS, but
this was a temple to the dog-headed god.
Yeah, their entire society acted this certain way over stuff that's completely not true and not scientific. They don't say it that way, but that's the way it comes across.
Well, and they're not.
Level of snark involved.
Yes.
Yeah, and those religious systems aren't understood as esoteric. They're like, they take it literally, like, oh yeah, the Egyptians must have believed in this animal-headed god. It's like, no, that really it has different levels of meaning to it.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's not literal. So things might be more of actual, like you're saying, like things are actually more of what we would think of now as science, but they're under the guise, like we're trying to understand it as religion.
Yeah. Yes.
Because religion and science are completely in our society
separate.
They're separated, right? One is just it's some kind of, I don't know, non-scientific endeavor, the way it's looked at. And then the other one is completely devoid of spirituality. It's just the facts.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the idea. And it seems like, you know, why is it that when you go into one of these cathedrals, why does it create these emotions inside, you know, where you're just like, wow, you just have this spiritual, almost enlightenment feeling going in there? Well, there's some type of connection between that structure and the way it is symbolic of nature in itself, using the geometry, using these mathematical principles that are part of the universe. It is sort of like this, it's uniting these things. So it's both.
Yeah, like you said, bringing the heavens down to earth in the form of a structure. And then when you walk into that structure, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And it is amazing because it encodes these principles that are that are visible in nature everywhere if you know where to look, right? So
like these structures are microcosms of the universe.
Yes, and people who don't even know anything about the universe or the cosmos or precession or sacred geometry or anything, they can still walk into one of these structures and have that same feeling. They may not know why. You know, they may think, well, this is a holy place. Well, maybe it's holy. You know, we use these words like spiritual and holy, but you know, what do they mean? Well, maybe it's that sensation you get is because it is harmonious with the principles of the universe itself.
Yeah. So so to achieve that level of spiritual understanding, to build one of those structures, you have to have all these hard sciences like the mathematics and the geometry and the astronomy and all of that together, and an understanding of the bigger picture to even build them in the first place, that suggests, you know, if you're looking at these mound structures around, I mean, that really suggests that why is it that these people had that knowledge and understanding at the same time that people across oceans had it? Was it shared? You know, that's the most interesting thing to me.
Yeah.
And it seems like it in so many different places in the world over vast amounts of time, somehow this knowledge was carried on, preserved and shared over and over again.
And that's like the ultimate antidote to chauvinism. You know, it's saying that we all have this like root that we all get it from.
Yes.
Of course, the chauvinism comes in when people theorize, oh, well, my people are the root of it. My people are the root of it. You know, and we see that from every direction. But it's
clearly,
like
you
a
guys
prescription against it.
Clearly, you guys were the root of it. I mean, this is pretty obvious to me now that your ancestors are the reason we have all this knowledge.
Yeah, it's the Aryan Tibetans or the.
Well, I think that I really like the point you made that searching for this source is a kind of a spiritual quest, and that, you know, that people in the sciences should understand that and not try to stop it or belittle it.
And so sometimes when they belittle it to an extreme, like it feels almost like you wouldn't belittle someone's religion like that openly. It's like, you know, so. Well,
they feel pretty free doing it with ancient people's religions. I mean, when you read the way they write about it, it's I don't know. And, you know, like, here's an interesting thing. You're talking about the mound mythos. There's like an opposite kind of it's like a reverse, not really, situation happening with the Northeast. We just had a couple of guests on the show that were talking to us about aligned walls and effigy mounds and stone structures in the Northeast of the United States. And these structures are all, you know, people that archaeology says that these are colonial. In other words, that they were built, that they're very young, and they were built by colonial
Talking about
people.
like a America Stonehenge. of the
Yeah, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
there are stone chambers that are just in the middle of nowhere, right? That are aligned to solstices or equinoxes or whatever, and they're thought of as root cellars or basically colonial structures.
Cairns and rock piles that are thought of as just like, farmers just chucking rocks out of the field,
Yeah, except that they are building these giant snake effigies or something, right? So it's interesting because it's like the opposite of the mound mythos, right? It's not saying these seem to be actually more ancient, maybe not incredibly ancient, but more ancient than colonial, and they have a lot of features that don't seem to match with farmers throwing rocks out of their fields or people needing a root cellar. Like, why would you align your root cellar to, like the solstice or something? I don't know. Or have it point in multiple ways to various astronomical features, but they're considered to be colonial. And that's going on today. That's ongoing now. It's some of these people we were talking to, Linda Zimmerman and Glenn Kreisberg, are constantly working with various institutions up there trying to get these places protected. And it's hard because they're considered to have very little archaeological value.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, all the stuff it's really fascinating. I know Adam was wanting to talk about a particular book, I think, with you guys too.
All right.
Yeah.
We should do that. Before we do that, I have one more question.
Yeah.
And then maybe we could take a break.
Yeah, we'll take a break.
So on this same subject, I wanted to ask you. You are interested in the hoaxes. What do you think about a hoax fad?
The hoax fad?
Yeah, like a fad of the same types of hoaxes in archaeology that just happens over and over and over. Everybody starts doing it.
It's the cool thing to do.
I'm referring to the giant skeletons.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they call all the newspaper articles. They call those all. That's part of a hoax fact.
Yeah, there's
right?
there's one actually. I just went to this place here, not too far, pretty close to where they have Bonnaroo. Actually, it's called a Old Stone Fort, and it's this big 50-acre enclosure that's like surrounded by a giant wall. That they thought there's all kinds of speculation. Is some kind of ancient European thing, because there's also this. There's like where they dug out the limestone to build most of it, or some naturally occurring stuff. There's what looks like a moat also. So there's all kinds of speculation around that. But around that was a cave called the Big Bone Cave. And I guess someone found this supposed giant in there. You can find like the old newspaper articles and stuff, but it turns out that it's actually a giant prehistoric sloth.
A sloth, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've heard of that, and what are some of those other ones? I'm trying to remember the ones that were actually like sculptures. There's a few of those. I think there's one in Colorado.
Yeah, there were definitely some giant hoaxes. But what Kyle is specifically asking about is, do you think that all those giant finds, so many hundreds of them reported across the country, were all part of some kind of fad? Like a hoax?
Yeah, I think it was a hustle, man. I mean, you're talking about people out in the middle of nowhere, didn't really have a lot of prospects, some of them, and man, I mean, you could get people from miles and miles around to pay, a nickel or whatever to see the stuff.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. See, that's a money.
A lot of it is just economic.
That's a money-making endeavor. I
think that's part of it, guys. But I also think there's probably there could be a religious motivation to it as well. The whole idea of the Genesis 6 stuff, the giants and the earth and all that, just trying to go again. It's like trying to go back and backdate and prove that happened. Okay. So I think there might have been both a monetary and a religious motivation to it.
So that's what I was going to point out, is that like with the story about the guy at the conference selling stuff, like obviously there's a motive there. He's making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's so many of these accounts in newspaper articles and stuff where it's just like some construction workers that were digging up a sewer line and they found these giant bones, and then the Smithsonian people came and took them away for study, and then bam,
Nobody makes any money. Yeah.
Nobody makes money. The story's over, and the story ends with something about a follow up, but it never happens. And then the Smithsonian's like, we don't have that.
Well, then is the motivation something like, well, okay, we found these skeletons and we've heard these stories, but like the Smithsonian obviously took them, but we need something to prove that this was actually here, so they put the statue in the ground or whatever, and yeah, there's it could be something like that too.
Yeah. It's just
I think it was mostly just a hustle, and I think most of them were like, tricksters. I think there's a big tradition in, it's like the P.T. Barnum types, man. I think P.T. Barnum ended up buying a couple of those too, and that was some of his first little shows. I just think it's kind of it's an American character. I think that because of the age of antiquarianism and relic hunting and hoaxes, this stuff was so big. It was big business. You had people doing all this weird magical money finding, and it just got so much this weird stuff. I just think it was just ingrained in America that. And people knew of things like that. They read about it in a newspaper article, or they heard of people doing stuff like that before. I think it was just it was a pastime, doing all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't really subscribe to there really being these giants that were covered up by the Smithsonian. A lot of the journalism of the time too, was kind of exploitative, and right. I don't know how much to really trust a lot of that stuff. A lot of the stuff from even books like the John Haywood stuff, a lot of his tales of giants and pygmies, it was second and third hand accounts already by the time it gets into the book. Then his book is quoted by another book and another one, and it's I don't know. I can't really put a lot of stake.
My cousin's friend's brother was in the darkest heart of Africa, and he encountered these beings. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that pygmies have been confirmed, though. I mean, there have been enough accounts of those. I think that they're.
Yeah.
I'm sure they found some really short people.
Yeah.
And some of the giants might just be some really a tall ass tribe of 7 foot 8 foot tall dudes.
That's what I'm talking about.
There's embellishment, and look, Serfiel's right about the time period. I mean, all throughout the 1800s and into the early 20th century. I mean, you had, especially around the time of the Spanish American War, the yellow journalism, and it's about that same time that you get the airship mystery. And how, there's some interesting, compelling cases with the airship mystery, but there's also a lot of bullshit.
It just makes it impossible to sift through.
I think the same of the giant reports. There's a lot of crap, but it's not all crap.
There could be something to it, but maybe the account has been possibly embellished. Maybe they said, they were 12 feet long when they were actually guys that were probably 6 or 7. I mean, that stuff I think happens all the time. It's just the game of telephone, if you really think about it.
Yeah, Jimbo didn't have he didn't have a ruler or measuring tape on him. So that thing was 12 foot tall. By the time it gets to the journal,
they were about yay long and yay wide.
By the time it gets to the journalist, it's you got 15, 20 foot tall mummy or whatever.
So this is like the fisherman. It's the fisherman story basically.
Yeah, telephone.
Yeah.
But then
the fisherman, he tells you that the fish that got away was probably 4 or 5 feet long.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
You can't see it. I didn't catch it, but man, it was huge. I promise.
Don't discount the whole the trying to prove the biblical stuff, because I mean we're still dealing with that now, right? I mean, look at the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they're still trying to make it fit.
Yeah.
So I think that they were trying to do that back in 150, 200 years ago.
And there are also forces that are trying to make sure it never fits.
That's right.
And you can see that with the Comet Research Group and the whole Younger Dryas, the floods.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. It's no,
Yeah, that's too close.
It wasn't a big flood that flooded the whole place. It was a bunch of small floods. Blah blah blah. Like, you know.
Yeah, the forces
It goes
are
both ways.
It goes both ways, and
Yeah,
not only
absolutely.
that, but there are. What's also interesting about the giant stuff, you know, just before we get into these other topics, the giant stuff, it isn't in just Christianity that those myths exist.
True.
Like, you'd be hard pressed to find a culture that didn't talk about giants in some form.
Yeah, some kind of heroes or big, or
Yeah.
half god, half man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Demigods.
it is ubiquitous across, human culture and mythology and legend. Native Americans talk about them, and the little people. They talked about giants and tiny people. So we're fascinated with all the stories because I do agree that there's probably a lot of hoaxing, but at the same time, it isn't just people trying to confirm biblical crap or people doing hoaxes, because the stories are too widespread to totally ignore. So I think that's kind of our outlook on most of these ancient myths and stuff. Like, yeah, it gets embedded in religion and then it gets weird, but still,
I think
there's something in there.
I think that there's probably something to some of it. Yeah. I think that there's definitely a root to the mythology.
Yeah.
There's a truth to the mythology, as there usually is.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's plenty of room for healthy speculation, and it shouldn't be discouraged. And like I said, most of this I think is really more of a spiritual quest and using archaeological methods.
Yep. That's a good point. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about
Snakes.
Gods of Eden and the conference.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
All right. All right, and we're back with the guys from Conspirinormal. And yeah, how you guys doing?
Doing well.
How was the break? You had a couple of beers?
Yeah, about a whole 6-pack.
Excellent. So we want to discuss in no particular order some stuff about the Gods of Eden, and also you guys have an online conference coming up, which should be real interesting.
Yes, we do. We have the Strange Realities Conference coming up.
Strange Realities. Yeah. So what was the impetus for starting the conference? And I think you guys did one last year. Was last year the first one?
Yeah, last year was the first one.
In real life.
2019. Yeah, in real life, back when you could do that kind of thing. So it was always just something that was in my mind that I wanted to do. I had gone to several different conferences in the past. It was kind of like a thing that I liked to do a while back and still enjoy to do. And about 2017, I went to Roswell, New Mexico to a good friend of mine, Guy Malone, who later spoke at the first conference and now is part of the second conference. And that was part of his conference was part of the big 50 years or 70-year anniversary for Roswell, New Mexico, and whatever crashed there. And so we did that. That was with Rob, who you guys have probably heard on the show before.
Yep.
Rob ran sound for him, and I kind of had the idea at the time. I was like, you know what? I think it might be time to kind of start moving to the next level, to the conference level. And so about like 2019, early 2019, I was just like, Serfiel had this place in mind that was down the street from his place, and we thought, well, I think we could do this. And that place, I think, went out of business, right, Serfiel? Yeah. And so, but we had that connection with Rob, working at this place called SIR, which is like it's a place where bands practice in
It's an
Nashville.
equipment rental.
Yeah, and great big room that we could be in. We had a free sound guy in Rob because he could run the sound. And we were like, we could do this fairly cheap. And I was like, we could fly in people from out of town, and some people like Joshua Cutchin, who was pretty close, because he was only in Atlanta. And we just said, I think we can do it. So we just started, getting people in. We had, I think we had 8 speakers, 9 presentations last year. And we just actually streamed those on our Facebook page, Conspirinormal Facebook page. We just streamed those last Saturday. So those are actually available now on YouTube and on our Facebook page for people to check out if they want all the presentations from last year, because we got them. My cousin actually came up from Atlanta, got them filmed. Then we had somebody edit them this year. And so, it was just like something that I always wanted to do. And so we're going to do it again this year.
Last year, it was a single day thing, right?
It was a single day thing.
Yeah,
Right. And we were going to pretty much do the same thing. I think what our original plan for it this year was we were going to be at the same place, but we were going to do it like a dinner kind of setting. And we were going to have like about 2 or 3 speakers that night. And then we would have the rest of the speakers on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the world changed because of COVID. And we didn't know whether we were going to do it, what we were going to do, until probably about late May, early June. And we decided that what we were going to do was do an online conference this year. And that, I think, really freed up some things. I mean, it's easier to do an online conference in the fact that for the people that, not that they would travel anyway, but if you think about it, people got to pay a certain amount to go to the conference, which is probably like the cheapest part of their trip.
Yeah.
Then they got to pay for a hotel. They got to pay for airfare, or they got to pay gas to get here.
Yep.
With this, we could keep the price fairly low, which is $20. And we were also able to get more people to be a part of this,
right?
Because we didn't have to fly anybody in. So we have 21 speakers spread out over 3 days, which is the 25th, 26th, and 27th. Friday is more of an evening thing, but the 26th and 27th, those are going to be pretty much full day events.
Wow.
And we're going to be streaming it live all day. And if people are interested, it's $20 to get tickets. That's 21 speakers. I mean, that's less than $1 per speaker. When people sign up, they can sign up through Eventbrite, which is what we've got it on there. They can go to strangerealitiesconference.com and they can get a ticket through there. And we actually have it set up for like a private Facebook group that the only people that have paid can get into that group.
Oh, yeah.
And they will be able to watch the conference all day. And they can actually also, because Facebook obviously preserves what you stream, as long as you leave it up, they can actually go back. If they've missed anything, they can go back and watch the presentation. So we think it's a pretty good deal for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
But here's my question. I have a bunch of artifacts I found in my backyard. How can I sell them at your conference?
We'll get you a little segment. You can stream, show them, and then they can do like, we'll have an auctioneer.
All right.
We'll get Jim Banal to be an auctioneer. I think he can do the.
Oh, yeah.
25, 40. So we do it like that. That's how we'll do it.
Excellent.
We also are going to have something. We're going to have like a tip jar for the speakers as well.
Oh, that's cool.
The $20 will, some of that is going to go to the cost to cover these speakers, but also these guys are putting in their time, they're putting in their effort. Some of them have some of them have books that they're selling, so we kind of like, push people to buy the books and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. And the lineup is just really epic. Like Adam said, we were able to get a lot of people we couldn't get before just because of time and space constraints. But with all these people, it really shows a good spread, and it's a good representation of like all the different stuff we cover on the show. So it's kind of, it's a really good presentation of what Conspirinormal really represents too. So it's kind of in line with that. And some of our favorite people who've been on the show and a lot of recurring guests and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you got Soraya. Isn't Soraya going to be a part of it?
Soraya is going to be a part of it.
Is he actually giving a presentation, or is he?
He's actually giving a presentation.
Wow.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're very excited to have him. He actually was, when we were still planning on doing it.
Yeah, he was going to travel.
Event, he was going to come to Nashville, but that obviously did not happen.
Right.
So we hope next year. I mean, we're kind of looking towards next year what we're going to do. Of course, a lot of it is going to depend on the situation in the world, but we're kind of thinking about doing it kind of like a hybrid event. Possibly doing like a day of live presentations and then a day of online presentations.
Yeah.
But streaming the entire thing online.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's the way to do it. It does seem like you could get a lot more both attendees and speakers that way.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I was always kind of against the online thing because in my opinion, I always felt like, well, it's a happening. It's a thing, it's like, it's not going to be as good as it is being online, but now I've kind of changed my thoughts on that. And I think it's just another way for people that, cause there's people that don't have the money or the cash or the time to go to come to Nashville to see this, and it's a big investment, and having that online component I think is very really important.
Yeah, and I think
seeing a lot of these kind of springing up right now.
Right, and I think that combining the two is probably your best bet. You'll be able to eventually, if everything goes back to somewhat semi-normal, then you'll be able to have live event. You'll have in-person live events that people can attend, but also stream it, and then you can have people that live halfway across the world can attend in a way.
Yeah.
As opposed to just not being able to go at all. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our friend Miguel, Red Pill Junkie. He's going to be beaming in from Mexico City.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then people from all over the states. So yeah, it's real cool. It's freed up a lot of people to be able to speak and see.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
But like you said, there's really nothing better than those hanging out in real life and those hallway conversations, where you really get the deep stuff, and the secrets. But,
we're gonna try to replicate some of that.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to do. We're gonna do like a Zoom,
like hangouts at night that all the speakers and the attendees can hang out together and stuff like that.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
We're going to try not to let Alan Greenfield dominate the conversation.
Just everybody needs to have like hotel hallway backgrounds, right?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
Good idea.
Very perfect.
Yeah.
Would you guys like to know who we have other than Soraya, which I'm sure is worth the price of admission alone?
Yeah, let's hear it.
But okay, so guys, well, I'll just kind of run down the list here with some of these people, and we've actually been putting a lot of these on our Facebook page. If you guys want to go check that out, Conspirinormal Facebook page, we've got little graphics for each one and a little title. We got Brent Rains, who's going to be there. Who's going to be part of this? Brent is he's an older ufologist here in Tennessee, and he's going to be talking about his presentation is called "Opening Pandora's Box: UFOs and the Psychic Nexus." An exploration into the psychic components of the UFO enigma. So we're bringing some UFOs into it. Aaron Gulius, who is the host of the Saucer Life podcast. But Aaron is actually not going to be talking about UFOs. He's going to be talking, his presentation is Happy Endings, Triumphalist Conspiracy Narratives Since the End of the Cold War. And basically talking about conspiracy theories that are to the positive side, at least for the people that believe in them. David Metcalf is also going to be there, who's going to talk about hidden pathways of magic, supernatural living in the American marketplace. Basically, that is about what he calls gas station or grocery store grimoires, where you can find these odd like books of divination that have kind of a Christian bent in gas stations and grocery stores.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon that David has found it's particularly in the American South.
Wow.
Stephanie Quick, all the way up from California. She's going to be talking about wild talents, activate your capacity to manifest synchronicity.
Oh, yeah.
John Tenney. I'm sure you guys know who John is. He is got a really cryptic title for his 6079 Tenney J Life in Room 101. And what was he? I think he described it last night, didn't he, Serfiel? Kind of about.
Yeah. Are we supposed to? Like
don't give away the secret.
Yeah, I don't know if we're supposed to let anyone know.
Yeah, we might not want to. Yeah, well, I mean, he let everybody know on the stream last night, but
it's conspiracy theory related also, kind of on a meta level.
Well, what's his normal topics? Maybe that would give people a hint.
He's kind of all across the board, man, really. I mean, he's a ghost hunter, but he's also an old-time conspiracy researcher too.
All right.
John's was on a show called Ghost Stalkers back a few years ago, which is probably, I think, one of the better ghost hunting shows that was out there, but it only lasted like about 6 seasons. I mean, not 6 seasons, but 6 episodes. Red Pill Junkie, like Serfiel mentioned before, it's called Smoke, Mirrors, and Plexiglass Windows, the Nested Deceptions of Planet Ummo, UMMO, which is a not as well known UFO or contactee case in Spain, but people here in the United States or the English speaking world may not know it as well as like people in the Spanish speaking world. So he's going to enlighten us on that. And Jenny Ashford, who is part of the 13 O'Clock podcast, which and YouTube series, which is a very cool and interesting show. You guys should check out sometime. It's pretty fun. She's going to be talking about some true crime, and she's going to talk about unsolved murders in the oldest city, which is about some murders that happened in St. Augustine, Florida. And she's in Florida. She's working on that as part of her book. The great and someone that, is just has no comparison, no rules, no comparison. Mr. Tim Banal of America.
Yeah.
He's going to be talking about, it's a continuation of his presentation from last year, where he talked about kind of the strange history and strange beliefs of flat earth theorists.
Oh, wow.
And Tim actually went to, right the month after Strange Realities 1, he actually went to the Flat Earth conference in Dallas.
Man,
so he kind of did like an embedded journalist slash kind of
that's dedication.
Anthropologist thing.
Yeah. So his is called Among the People of Flat Earth, Recollections from a Visit to the International Flat Earth Conference. Joshua Cutchin, I know you guys know Josh.
Oh yeah.
He is going to be talking about bringing some cryptozoology to you guys, the Buzz and the Beast, altered states of consciousness, and Bigfoot encounters, which if you guys have, I don't know if you've read Where the Footprints In, but that's a really good book. So I think he's going to be pulling some things from that.
It's about Bigfoot stealing your stash.
Yeah, something like that. Kiki Dombrowski, who until lately lived in Nashville, but she's a witchcraft practitioner. She's been on our show. She's going to be talking about prophecies, predictions, and cycles during our lifetimes. That's the title of hers. And Tony Kale, who we just posted up his today. Now, there's a two-part. There's actually two speakers doing one presentation, and they're taking two parts. Tony is taking the first part of that, which is called Hidden in Shadows When Folk Magic Met the Paranormal. And Tony studies folk magic, especially hoodoo is one of his biggest focus because he lives in Memphis. And then Jack Montgomery is taking part 2 of that. And Jack is a practitioner of folk magic, primarily the Pennsylvania Dutch powwow tradition. Okay. So those are the ones that I have as far as people, and also Michael Carter, Reverend Michael Carter. I always want to call him doctor for some reason. He is going to be there. He's going to be talking about UFOs in the Bible, which I guess is kind of similar to Gods of Eden, I suppose.
Yeah.
He's been on Ancient Aliens, quite a few other shows. Alan Greenfield, who we just mentioned, is going to be doing a comedy act. But actually, he's going to be, the author of Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts and the founder of the Free Illuminist movement. He is going to be doing a question and answer session.
All right.
So make sure somebody asks him questions.
What about Soraya? You didn't mention him.
Soraya is going to be talking about, I believe it's going to be something, it's actually here on the website. He says that he's going to be talking about time and the odd connection to unexplained phenomenon, as well as different ways of looking at experiences people have. So
that ought to be interesting.
Soraya is a deep thinker.
Yeah.
Ren Collier, who we mentioned before. Ren is going to be talking about the Hollow Earth.
Oh, cool.
Mythology.
I think he's kind of
the
giving
first
a
time
whole expose on the history of it in mythology and folklore, right?
Yes. And probably linking it to occultism as well.
Yeah, Ren's also a magic practitioner, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Future, our good friend Michael Bennett, he's going to be giving a presentation on some aspects of his forthcoming book series on 2 Masters and 2 Gospels. So his is more of a kind of, I guess you could say, a conspiracy type presentation as well.
That's two masters and 2 gospels. Is that what you said?
2 Masters and 2 Gospels.
Yeah.
That's the name of his book. And we've got Steven Steiner, also known as Recluse. And he's going to be talking about like right-wing imagery. Was that right, Serfiel?
I'm not sure.
Something like that. And some of like the magic, I guess, like occultism that's associated with that, and magical and some like synchromistic type of aspects to it. Greg Bishop.
He gets really deep on some real dark conspiracy stuff to make you not be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, absolutely. You should check out his podcast, The Farm. I can't give it enough praise. Greg Bishop. Now he's going to be talking about. He told us last night. Didn't give us a title, but I guess kind of like a co-creation theory and kind of like the obliqueness of the UFO phenomenon.
Oh yeah.
And how that influences researchers and witnesses. Timothy Renner. Not quite sure what Renner is going to be talking about, but whatever
really
it is, it may deal with cryptozoology and probably paranormal aspects of that.
And like last year when him and Josh did a joint presentation, They basically gave everyone a preview last year of what was in the book that was upcoming but has come out now, Where the Footprints. And I think Tim's material this year is going to be kind of a real preview too of stuff that hasn't been released.
All right.
Guy Malone, who I mentioned before, who I went to his conference back in 2017, he is going to be giving a presentation on aliens and demons and the association between the two. And I do believe that is everybody.
Man, sounds like a good lineup. Yeah, I think isn't Greg is also he's Radio Mysterioso, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Greg is
also
awesome.
a great podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is everyone that is going to be at the Strange Realities Conference 2020, which is going to be online September 25th, 26th, 27th.
StrangeRealities.com, Conspirinormal.com.
Yep.
You've got everything from UFOs to magic and folklore to conspiracy. It's just all over the place. Cryptids. It gives a real good representation of what our podcast is all about.
All right. Sounds good. And it's an apt name for the conference, given the times we live in. Strange Realities.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. It's like Serfiel said. I mean, we're combining kind of the paranormal, conspiracy theory, real, and when I say conspiracy theory, like there's some real like serious research going on with some of these, but especially Dr. Future and Recluse. I mean, they really dig deep into their respective fields of interest. And they really bring a lot of just information to the table.
All right. Sounds good. So people need to go sign up. I think we'll be there.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. All right.
StrangeRealities.com.
Yeah, that was a great commercial you guys sent us.
StrangeRealitiesConference.com. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to. Serfiel was afraid that it sounded too much like a monster truck.
That's exactly
commercial.
what I thought. I was like, man, this is awesome. It's just straight up monster.
You got to have
Strange Realities.
I was like, that's great. It's perfect.
Yeah.
If we could have put in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday.
Yeah, exactly.
And Saturday.
So have you been reading Gods of Eden? You were waving the book at us.
Well, so I read Gods of Eden a while ago.
Yeah.
Like, man, we're talking probably a little less than 25 years ago. And it was one of those books that I really enjoyed at the time. But as I kind of more, have done a lot more research and and had some of my viewpoints changed, I've kind of, gone away from it. It's one of those books that like you can pick up and you can just like turn to a chapter and you can just like start reading. It's like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that you guys did. How many parts was that? 7 parts or something?
I think
like
so.
that?
I think 7 parts. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get through like the whole thing?
No.
Because I thought it was almost like you were I could tell that, like, because I could remember reading like those parts, at least in the first couple of parts. I could remember like reading all that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting book. William Bramley, I don't think is the guy's name. I think that was a pen name, what I've always understood. But it's odd. It's an odd book in a way because it's like he was trying to figure out the roots of warfare.
Yeah.
And trying to really understand that. And somehow that goes into religion, which, you can see that. Okay. That's not a big leap of logic. But then all of a sudden, it's like you kind of see like how he worked backwards. Like the book is linear, but It's like he was trying to figure out, oh, okay, well, we're talking about all this, 20th century stuff, and they're trying to figure out all that, and they're trying to figure out how secret societies influenced conflict. And then somehow that ends up basically with the Zechariah Sitchin stuff,
Yeah.
which I felt like, in many ways I kind of find problematic now, just because of some of like the research of somebody like Dr. Heiser, Dr. Michael Heiser. I don't know if you've ever looked into him, but he pretty much is like debunks
That's
Sitchin.
Sitchiniswrong.com, right? That's
Sitchiniswrong.com. Yeah, exactly. Because Dr. Heiser is an actual ancient Near East scholar and linguist, and says it just like, Sitchin got everything wrong. But Bramley, whoever Bramley is, based everything essentially off of that.
You obviously haven't been to sitchinisbitchin.com.
No, I haven't.
Well, so I agree. When we went through the book this time, and I read it a while back too, not 25 years ago, but I read it a long time ago, and Kyle kind of went through it too. And when we went through it this time, after having done a lot of the podcast, a lot of this other research,
I wasn't sure anybody else had ever read this thing, man. And when you guys put that out, I was like, what?
it was
it was a book I randomly picked up at a bookstore back when I was like 19 or something.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember how I came across it. I can't recall, but I originally got a PDF a long time ago, and somebody mentioned it somewhere. I was probably on Above Top Secret or something like that. And who knows, I was somewhere on some conspiracy forum and someone was like, oh, you got to check this book out. So I read it. And yeah, it was a formative thing for me. It changed the way I look at a lot of things, but what I should say is that it led me into like, all right, I want to dive into this stuff. That's really what happened. And so going through it this time on the podcast, I had a lot of the same, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really buying this part, or I think that he's kind of glossing over something here, or I don't know if that connection can necessarily be made. But I do agree that his process was interesting, where he's basically looking at what is the source of warfare, and he's seeing this Machiavellian stuff happening all over the place, and he keeps seeing it as far back as he can go in history, right? And then if the farther back you go in history, obviously, once you get into the really old stuff, the gods start showing up and doing all the Machiavellian stuff. And I think that's really, if you want to just, if I was to give a synopsis of the book, I would just say that his basic thing is like, well, the source of this seems to be ancient, what ancient people called gods that came from the sky. So yeah, he's kind of going down a Sitchin route there. But I don't know. I don't fully buy that Sitchinwaswrong.com. I don't completely buy that. I have read a lot of that guy's stuff, and to me, it all seems like differences in interpretation. He's in a lot of places. People are like, "Oh, Sitchin was totally wrong on this," and I'm just like, "Well, he's interpreting it differently than you are, but it isn't like he's completely wrong. We don't know what these people were saying either. We have these ancient texts. They say this thing. You can look at multiple different translations, both by that guy that has that website, plus many other legitimate translators. All the translations are in some ways similar, but in other ways drastically different. But they all seem to be kind of saying the same thing, that gods came out of the sky and they were running everything back in the day. And then the interpretation of the scientific realm is that this is all religious crap. And Sitchin was just like, well, let's take them seriously. Gods came out of the sky, lowercase g gods is what we call them. And whether those were aliens or are other people that were advanced, that were living somewhere else on the planet, I don't know.
Right.
But
which is what I tend to more, I'm much more an ancient civilization guy than I am ancient aliens guy.
Yeah. Kyle and I really like the ancient civilizations interpretation. But of course, we've talked to Laird Scranton too, and he's like, look, you can't just say that about all of these, because he's done all this research in the Dogon, and the Dogon people are like, well, these weren't people, and they weren't aliens coming out of the sky. They were actually coming from a different realm. and
Yeah,
interacting.
the interdimensional kind of stuff, and that's kind of what I was about to kind of say, because kind of leafing through it now, where he talks a lot about, of course, he gets into the the Nazi occult stuff and how that came about, and he talks a lot about Freemasonry. There's even a chapter in here about Joseph Smith.
Yep.
Hey, hey, Uncle.
Yeah, and so he talks about that. He talks about Saint Germain.
Yes.
The Mount Shasta stuff, and I remember all this really well because a lot of especially the Saint Germain, this book was the first time I'd ever heard of any of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and but for him, starting off from this kind of materialist point of view, as ancient aliens, that these are physical beings from the sky. It's more like looking at this now, where you see the influence of maybe some kind of otherworldly entities, or especially with stuff like Serfiel and I've talked about this a lot, about the ascended masters. That's in Blavatsky and Theosophy. All that is I think that's what you're dealing with, is some kind of like, I guess for lack of a better term, interdimensional, like what Laird says.
I actually like to think of it that Bramley was going more along the lines of, say, like Charles Fort than he was so much Sitchin. I know he pulled a lot of stuff from Sitchin, but he also pulled stuff from Fort. And Fort was saying the same thing. Giant ships are going back and forth in the sky, and we are owned by them. Like, basically,
we're property. Is
exactly.
What Fort said. There's an interesting part to this book, and I thought that it was something that was kind of more original to him than borrowed from Sitchin. And a part that really always was, I found really compelling, and that was the chapter on the Black Death.
Yes, man, that was
and
fantastic.
I've probably read this chapter several times more than I've actually read the entire book since. But like he does some interesting things and says some interesting things about, like, the way that they were carrying scythes.
Yep.
Death is always the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if I believe any of this, but like, talking about these figures that would be out in fields, like spraying things.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the plague would start.
Yep.
Like, I found that compelling, and I found it compelling then, and I still find that compelling.
Yeah.
I can't really explain it, but I thought it was just an interesting idea that he was actually kind of thinking a little bit outside the box.
Yeah.
On that, instead of just giving lip service to the ancient aliens idea, which I think he published this in 1989, and he was probably writing it all through the 80s. So that was still, ancient alien stuff. I mean, it made its comeback obviously in the last decade, but then it was like extremely popular. My problem with the ancient aliens, any of the ancient aliens and stuff, ancient aliens material, is that it just comes from the materialist viewpoint. It doesn't give any line to like spiritual beings, which, all this stuff that we talk about on our show. I mean, you can say just about any of this stuff, like, Josh and Tim's book, where the footprints in. Yeah. People are seeing Bigfoot, but the manifestations are not, they don't have, it's like they defy physical reality.
Right. It's similar to UFOs. They seem to have a physical trace, and yet they defy physical reality as we know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's still room for people to be for people who are more materialist minded in just different aspects of psychology. If you don't have to necessarily believe in all the woo, but every night we go to sleep and see these entire different worlds that can profoundly impact us. So, whatever that is, it could just be, even if you are from that materialist viewpoint, just what's actually in the recesses of our minds, the subconscious, collective conscious, things like that.
Yeah. And I think that's what, like I said, with Laird is saying the same thing, like you don't have to look for ancient aliens. These people were interacting with something that is a lot like the Bigfoot thing that we see, or the UFO, this stuff that seems to come here from somewhere else. It manifests in a semi-physical way and has physical effects and leaves physical traces, but isn't totally physical, can vanish without a trace, you know, in front of your eyes. And some of these ancient peoples were talking about being taught or speaking to or interacting with these beings, and they have depictions of them. And, you know, they still make masks of them today. And, you know, ancient alien people will latch onto that and say, well, look, these are aliens. But, I mean, yeah, what is an alien, really? I mean, is a transdimensional being basically an alien to Earth? Yeah, I think so. You know, it's not a nuts and bolts thing like flying here from some other world in our universe, though. But I don't know. I do, like I said before, Kyle and I kind of like we like the idea that there were ancient advanced civilizations that may have been doing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
That the ancient aliens people attribute to aliens. And, you know, like what is Giorgio always pointing out? They were flesh and blood entities. Well, yeah, they were people.
Right. Yeah.
So I never read this book. Is this like how did you all encounter this?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I can't remember where I first came across it, but I remember when I first started reading it, it was blowing my mind. I mean, the whole thing was blowing my mind. I was aware of Sitchin at the time, and I did recognize some of his work in there. But
I mean, he literally covers everything.
Yeah.
He goes through all of history, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, just any source of conflict. I mean, he covers communism. He covers the road, like the round table, Cecil Rhodes round table. So we're even getting into like Council on Foreign Relations, like
CFR,
you know, the Carol Quigley stuff. You know, he gets into all that. So it's just like it's basically one guy's unified field conspiracy theory.
That's right.
But at the end of it, there is some kind of like alien intelligence that is
that's his idea
that is in control.
Well, yes, he's basically saying that it seems as though throughout all of history, humanity has been that the conflicts that we see throughout history have been in some ways a product of a control mechanism set in place by something he calls the Custodians. He's like, I don't know what they are. You know, and he doesn't want to call them aliens because I found that interesting because he's like, look, you know, whether they're aliens or not, he doesn't really know. So he's like, let's just call them the Custodians, the people who who are running.
Some Gnostic sects really have that view.
Yes, and there's the archons, right? They're kind of exactly. They're manipulating in the background all the time. And this is why, you know, and I found it interesting too, because you can kind of, when we have this joke that we've got a Discord chat, and now we're always telling each other, you know, that sounds like custodial bullshit right there. It's like, you know, anytime you see some aspect of control, some kind of control mechanism operating in the background, making everybody fight each other all the time instead of getting stuff done, that's custodial BS, right?
Yeah.
Whoever those people are.
Basically, he takes it to the two Sumerian gods or Babylonian gods. Was it Enki and Ea?
Enlil,
yeah. And I forget which is which, but
Enki's the cool one who liked people but is demonized throughout the rest of history. And
he started the Brotherhood of the Snake.
Yeah, Brotherhood of the Serpent.
That sounds kind of familiar.
Yeah, doesn't that sound a little familiar there? Yeah.
And so he starts that, and it's like that is like kind of what Bramley terms the idea of like the custodial religion, which is set up by the custodians to control mankind.
Yeah.
And this idea of like the maverick religion, which is like something that breaks away. And Enki is usually in charge of that. He's usually depicted as like the serpent in the garden. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we're getting into things that are kind of like, I guess, stuff that like, you know,
Luciferian.
Yeah, Luciferian stuff, you know, like I guess like Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall, I guess would have written about. And
yeah, Hall definitely.
So the Maverick religions, you know, don't stay Maverick very long. They get co-opted,
you
know, like, you know, Buddha was a Maverick religion, and Jesus started a Maverick religion, but they all eventually get co-opted by the Custodians, and that, you know, and the religions, and then first religions and then secret societies, once religion doesn't really work anymore, are set up to essentially prolong human conflict and keep us fighting with each other.
Right. That they are the intermediaries between the custodial powers and the human interface on the planet. So the big religions, or even, not even the big ones now, but just these ancient big religions, ones that are completely gone now, that started gigantic empires. And then, you keep coming up into the present where you have secret societies, and some of these are all part of what he called the corrupted brotherhood, because Enki initially started the Brotherhood of the Serpent in order to inject the maverick teachings, what's really going on, into humanity in a secret way. But that got corrupted soon after it was started, and now it's used as a custodial tool.
So it sounds, well, basically that concept is the white versus the black lodge.
Right.
And this sounds like it was kind of like the Morning of the Magicians for Generation X. Like it kind of gives this expose on like greatest hits of conspiracy and occult secret societies, all this stuff, and
with UFOs added in.
Yeah,
right, just toss in some aliens.
Well, it sounds cool. I'd like to check it out.
I loved the ancient stuff. Even if he's completely wrong about the custodians and everything that's going on, all of the looking at the different ancient civilizations was fantastic. It was a great overview of certain aspects of it, all the way up to, like you said, Adam, up to, Saint Germain. Just like he goes through a lot of anomalous topics. And man, you're right that the plagues stuff was absolutely fascinating.
Still it's compelling.
Yeah. I think we did 7 parts, but I think I didn't read much out of the second half of the book, which was mostly modern history, because our podcast is focused on ancient stuff. So we went through a lot of the first half of the book with all the ancient stuff, and I think we got up to Saint Germain and kind of stopped. I was like, we're done. It's just too recent. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, it's, he covers the Kennedy assassination. I mean, it's like everything. And then he gets into this chapter here. He's got about modern Ezekiel's, quote unquote, where he talks about alien abduction. He talks about the Andreasen affair, which is an interesting one if you've ever looked at that. A lot of religious imagery in that particular alien contact case.
Yeah, he points out that throughout the ages, you see these same kind of encounters that have these same imagery, and he ascribes that to custodians messing with people and starting up trends or causing conflict, or like, let's pick this guy and turn him into some prophet and send him off to this place to say all this stuff, and it's going to start this huge war. And he points out that the imagery is the same across history. Now that's his interpretation. There could be many other reasons why the imagery might be the same. It may not be necessarily purposeful for aspects of control, but he does have a compelling idea in some cases.
And there's other things that I've heard since I've read this book. I've heard ideas about entities that like to cause warfare. They like to cause conflict because they essentially can feed off the negativity.
Yeah.
And some of this idea of like the power of blood, and they can feed off of that. And, I've definitely have heard those ideas, the kind of like the I guess the supernatural parasite kind of thought,
and that doesn't actually conflict with what he was saying, because he makes it clear that he's like, look, I don't know what these custodians are trying to do, except they want to keep us in conflict all the time, because that's a good way to control.
Yeah, and he does talk a lot about spirituality in the book, and one of our criticisms was it seems like it sort of comes across like he's got spirituality all figured out.
Yeah.
That's one of the things.
Right.
But the point is that he's talking about spirituality, and that the custodians are trying to suppress the spiritual knowledge in mankind so that we remain ignorant of our higher selves and all this. So there's a spiritual component to it, and he's not necessarily saying these beings are all flesh and blood, because in some, like in the very beginning parts, he's talking about how they, it's the Sitchin idea that they are spiritual beings that are fully aware of their ability to, like actually exist in the spirit realm, so they can kind of pick, they can move
basically
in
live forever. Yeah.
live forever, move in and out of bodies, but it's a little bit of both. It's not all materialist aliens and UFO stuff.
Yeah. Well, it essentially just sounds like that, white versus black lodge kind of thing that like Alan Greenfield talks about, that comes from P.B. Randolph and Blavatsky and those kind of ideas, which is crazy because those ideas have influenced the like Christian conspiracy world so much. And it's really from an ultimately occult source.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of like we mentioned David Metcalf and his talk. That's kind of very similar to what these gas station grimoires, and then it's all like occulty kind of stuff, but it's like it has this Christian bent to it, and there's some interesting things. There's some interesting things around all that.
Yeah, I think that the battle between good and evil is just, it's in everything. You can't avoid it. There's whatever you think about good and evil, however you define good and or evil, you see it throughout all of history. People are talking about it, and that there seems to be these two warring factions. And I think that's kind of what Bramley was getting at in that, was that, but in his book, the good guys are always losing all the time. They're always, yeah. It's a sort of a grim thing that he's saying. He's like, look, we're totally owned and controlled by these custodians, and we've been fighting each other all the time because that's how they want it, and that the influence of the remnants of the uncorrupted brotherhood are few and far between, and only appear as tiny blips in history. And then every once in a while, someone will show up like the Buddha or Jesus and try to re-inject the teachings of Enki and the real spirituality and how to really achieve spiritual enlightenment back into the world. And then it almost completely gets co-opted and corrupted and changed and turned against everybody. And it's a pretty dark picture that he paints.
Yeah, he's a happy guy.
Yeah, real happy guy.
Yeah, he ends the book. I found this interesting. I remember he says, "Good luck and happy sleuthing."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, the final chapter I did read on the show, because he was basically like, here's my advice to anybody who wants to continue this kind of research. Look into this thing. I didn't have a chance to look into this, or I looked into this and there was so much here that I just couldn't do it. So he kind of gives a couple of roads for people to go down. I thought that was interesting. I wonder if anybody's taken him up on it.
I'm sure someone has since then.
Yeah.
It's an interesting book. It's obscure, but it's interesting.
So you don't buy it? You don't think we're owned by Custodians?
Not necessarily. I think there may be something to all that. I mean, I definitely think that there are. I do think that there are. I always use this word, but I always use the word entities, and because I don't know really what they are, but
yeah,
I do think that there's an influence on history, possibly.
Yeah,
especially when you get into 19th century with cultism and what are people really contacting sometimes?
Yeah,
it's a little like, I'm not one of these that are just like, oh, everything's demons, and I'm not one of these guys. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. But I do still think that you just you don't know really what you're messing with sometimes, and there's some people that are really confident that they know, but
yeah,
you can never be too sure what's really listening on the other end.
Right.
That's just kind of my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. With the channeling or the contacting these entities, I'm just like, well, I don't doubt that you are contacting something, but what exactly it is and what its motives are that's where I have questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of think the same thing as far as I'm definitely not a materialist. I think there might be some kind of influence of other things on human history and people. But also, like, there's a lot of utility in convincing people that you're on either side of that cosmic battle.
Yeah.
You know, it either adds to your ability to terrorize them, being on, you know, on the bad side, or, you know, you get followers and adherents when they think that you're on the good side of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of it too. And like, no matter if there is some kind of ultimate, pyramid of archons or something like that, like there's a lot of utility at the lower levels in like making people think that they're a part of some kind of hierarchy like that.
That's true. Which side are you guys on?
Great White Brotherhood.
Inky or Enlil? Which
Yeah.
one is
Pick
it,
one.
fellas?
The Great White Brotherhood.
You know who
Just
you're talking to.
battle with the Black Lodge.
Yes. Yes.
The Black
Yeah.
Lodge. All right.
I'll err on the side of good anytime. Right?
On both sides of the veil.
Yeah.
Got to add that in too.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting close to the end. I don't know what time we got here. Yeah.
We've been on there for a while.
Yeah, we have. Well, I
Great
wanted
talk, guys.
Yeah, I did want to talk some cryptids, but maybe we'll have to get to that some future time.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to everybody, definitely check out Josh and Tim's book. It's
Yeah.
one of the most fascinating books on cryptids I've encountered in a long time.
Yeah. And part 2, I think they said that it's supposed to be coming out in December.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So wait, you guys believe in cryptids?
I think it's some kind of weird spiritual thing. There might be some strange animals too, but I think the majority of it is like kind of like a, you know, what they talk about, like it's woods poltergeist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reference, the reason why they call the book that, where the footprints end, is because you have cases of people seeing the footprints of Bigfoot or whatever,
They
and
just
then all of a
stop.
sudden it
Yeah.
just stops.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
why does that happen? And then the cases that, especially the cases that have like this element of real high strangeness,
Yep.
there's kind of a difference between Bigfoot encounters in the West as opposed to Bigfoot encounters in the East. The further east you go, the more weird they get. But there's weirdness in the West too.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're dealing with something that is such a, and Renner talks about this a lot, when you're dealing with something that is such a large animal that is like more massive than a human being, and like just the sheer caloric intake it would have to have
Right.
to survive.
Yeah, it's a megafauna.
And when you get to, I mean, maybe it can survive in the forests of the Northwest, but when you get to someplace like here in Tennessee or where you guys are,
yeah.
like how, you know, what is it eating? Where, you know, like you would see it, like, you know, it's just,
Maybe it's like a whale. It eats plankton.
Yeah.
You know, a whale eats,
Yeah.
eats the tiniest thing in the ocean, and it's the biggest thing out there that we know about.
Well, I was just gonna say maybe occasionally it leaves behind some giant bones.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
There you go.
well, I mean,
Well,
if you want to go to the the Expedition Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, they do have a giant Bigfoot turd.
Hey.
So,
Bigfoot, or
must have been
what is
eating
it called?
something.
Cryptozoological scatology. But my thing that makes me think it's like weirder is the especially the like conjuration, like it responds to conjuration, like Tim, all these practices Tim does. I mean, it's like a weird you know, conjuration of it, and what a lot of secular, you know, I guess secular nuts and bolts Bigfoot people are actually doing, and they're not realizing they actually are doing conjure work.
Conjure work, yeah. And then they're
calling it forth, yeah.
Yeah, they'll call it habituation, but you're like, no, bro, you're conjuring it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the gifting stuff.
Yes.
And all that is,
spirit,
the first book deals with folklore. And so this primarily the comparison is between Bigfoot and fairy encounters with the Fae, and how that those are very similar. And basically, Tim Renner talks a lot about how, there's a motif. It's almost like an archetype need that we have in every culture for like a wild man. And that one of the things that he has said many times on his show is that when you get like, he's looked at different accounts from the 19th century and how, these, of course, we kind of got to take some of this with a grain of salt, but some of these accounts say that, Bigfoot or they don't describe him as Bigfoot.
Yeah,
the hairy ape man was wearing clothes.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then the accounts become more that he's, unclothed, he's covered with hair. And Tim looks at it almost as if like it's the exact opposite of UFOs, right? Like we started seeing UFOs and like, structured craft and space people as soon as we started getting more technologically advanced. They were always a step ahead of us.
Yeah.
So the phenomenon showed itself to us like that. With Bigfoot, it's opposite. It's like the more technologically advanced we become, the more in need for that wild man motif, and the more we see it. And there's I mentioned Expedition Bigfoot, where they have the gigantic Bigfoot turd. Tim made a point also that people, when they built that there in Blue Ridge, Georgia, which isn't that far from where I am right now.
Oh yeah.
They began to see Bigfoot.
I've heard this.
And to see Bigfoot crossing the road, and then and Tim makes the point that it's the reason why that happened is because they built. It's not just a museum; it's a shrine.
Yeah, it's a shrine. Yeah, that is very interesting.
The wild man thing reminds me of Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Yeah,
Right.
There's this wild man out in the woods who's huge and
that's one of the oldest versions of that story.
Yeah. He has to be civilized to defeat the Custodians.
That's right.
Yes, the Custodians always causing problems.
All right, guys, this was a fascinating chat. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Man. We had fun. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Wish you luck with the conference. Give all the data. Where can people find you? Where can people sign up to the conference? And we'll put some of this in the show notes too.
All right. The conference, go to strangerealitiesconference.com. Tickets are $20. That is September 25th, 26th, and 27th online. And Conspirinormal, you can find at conspirinormal.com.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, we're back for the final segment of the final segment. And that was our conversation with the Conspirinormal guys, Adam and Serfiel. Thanks so much for coming on, guys.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's going to be an interesting conference.
It does. And always an interesting conversation with those guys, too. We ranged over many topics. So I really like the whole, in some ways, this search for this lost civilization is kind of a spiritual thing. That was cool.
Yep.
Kyle's not buying
I'm
it.
buying it. No, it is. It is. Because it's that question, where did we come from?
Yeah. Who are we? What are we doing?
And for non-materialist reductionist, that is a spiritual question.
Yeah, that's right.
But, how do we build pyramids? So, there are material questions in there.
You know what I realized we didn't hit them with is the chimpanzee.
No,
We could have blown
I thought about
their
that.
minds with the chimpanzee.
Yeah, I think about that stuff all the time now. Chimpanzee.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation.
What else you got?
Well, I got a whole bunch of stuff, but I think we'll save it for like a bonus episode.
Yeah, we need to do it.
Yeah,
We got your 1-Up box, History Shift.
that's right.
It will happen.
Yeah, we got 1-Up box, and we got a whole bunch of emails and lots of other listener communications and just stuff Kyle's got stories, stuff we need to go through that we just haven't had a chance to because we've had all these guests and Swapcasts. So I think we're just going to do a bonus episode this week. That's what I think.
Yeah. We'll give it a shot.
Yeah. No promises, but we're probably going to do it. I feel like now maybe I shouldn't have said anything just in case
late.
some catastrophic thing happens and we can't do it. But yeah.
0 edits. Unless you say something I don't like. And then I'm going to cut it out. Just kidding. I'm going to cut that part out.
All right, guys, you can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the encyclopedia and the glossary and the SnakeSkins there, which is our merchandise store. Join the Pyramid Scheme, which is supporting the show and sending us straight to pyramids, hopefully one day. You can do that through Patreon and PayPal. The links are on the website. Give us reviews wherever you can. And thanks to everybody who has given us reviews and who supports the show.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Share the show wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter @SnakeBros with no vowels. Join the Facebook group if you're on Facebook, or join the Discord. That's where we're all hanging out. And Kyle even sometimes appears in there. Every once in a while, there's a Kyle sighting. That's what they say in the Discord. I had a Kyle sighting today.
Does happen sometimes. Very inconsistent.
That's right. But there's a link to the Discord on the website as well. You can find it there as the Snake Pit Discord. Just click on the link there, and then click on the join button, and it'll pop right in. Check out the Library of the Serpent, which is run by Jeff, who also runs the Discord. So thanks very much to him. The value for value system is working great with him, and also with History Shift, Brandon, who makes all of our YouTube videos. So thanks to him. You can follow him on Twitter and on YouTube @History Shift. Check out Pod Doodles. He takes some of our podcasts and turns them into doodling that you can watch while listening to the show. It's really cool. You can follow him on YouTube and on Twitter, Pod Doodles. Thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, The C Word, Grimerica, Conspirinormal, of course, and 7 Ages Audio Journal, and Skeptico.
Yeah. And check out randallcarlson.com.
That's right.
Site is up.
Site is up. All right, guys. We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.